Hello, happy everyone. Happy Wednesday. Well, we still don't have a Speaker of the House of Representatives, and I don't know if you've watched Kevin McCarthy get kicked in the nuts 6 times in a row now, but I gotta say, this whole process has been glorious for me. I'm enjoying every single second of it. But thankfully, the House is adjourned. The Republicans are going to go have a meeting amongst themselves. There's going to be arguing and fighting, and maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene will jump off a table or something. Who knows what goes on in those private meetings that we don't have cameras in? But they're coming back at 8 o'clock tonight, and I'm excited that we have a little bit of a break because I am really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. I'm going to introduce you to my amazing guest in a second, but I just want to do a couple quick things and let you guys know what's going on before we get started. Number one, if you are in my supporter community, movie night is back. We took a couple weeks break for movie night because, well, Jennifer has a life too. Jennifer is the wonderful host of our movie nights in my supporter Discord. And because this month is Jennifer's birthday month, it is Jennifer January, and she is picking out all the movies. And on Sunday, we will be gathering in my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. Eastern time to watch The Jazz Singer. I've never seen The Jazz Singer. Jennifer assures me it's great. But if you'd like to join us, whether you've seen the movie before or whether this will be your first time, one of the things I love about Jennifer's movie nights is that she puts together trivia. We have discussions. It is really a really nice kind of fun activity, and I really do enjoy it. We do them almost every single weekend. So that's something you're going to want to get into the Discord for. And if you don't want to watch The Jazz Singer, that's cool, man. We're going to watch another movie next week. I think we're watching Equilibrium or something like that. Jennifer has the full list. So if this isn't your cup of tea, just stick around for a week because we'll be watching something new. And then I did just announce officially, although my locals peeps have known about this for a while, we are reading Ender's Game for our next book club. This is one of my all-time favorite books. Do not mistake the movie Ender's Game with the book Ender's Game because I think the movie is pretty good. I really do actually enjoy the movie, but the book has so much more stuff in it. And we're going to gather for a discussion about that in my community, whether you're on Locals or Patreon or what have you, on February 18th at 3 p.m. to discuss the book. If I had to make a recommendation, I would say get the audiobook on Audible because it's really, really, really good. I've listened to it a couple times now. I also have a beautiful leather-bound copy of Ender's Game signed by Orson Scott Card himself that my wonderful husband got me as a gift for either Valentine's Day or my birthday or one of those holidays where you have to give people things. My husband picks out wonderful presents, and this is one of his all-time best gifts, and I'm really excited to have it. So definitely sign up and get involved and come and join us for book club. And if you've never read Ender's Game, please read it. Please read the book. I am begging you guys to read the book. Don't just watch the movie. It is so much better. Now, how do you get involved in that sort of stuff? You might want to ask. Well, I've got an answer for you. You can head over to activelyunwoke.com/support, where you can join up in any number of ways to support the work I'm doing, my unwoke activism, keep my content coming, that sort of thing. Now, of course, becoming a member on my YouTube channel is one of the options that you have. But to be quite frank, YouTube takes 30% of all money I make through my YouTube channel, and the other places that I have membership options take much less of a cut. So if you just want to do YouTube because it's easier for you, man, I get it. No harm, no foul. But might I recommend that you consider joining my locals community, or you consider joining my Patreon, or you consider becoming a paying member of one of my Substacks, either Actively Unwoke or Red Pill Diaries. All of the links are available on activelyunwoke.com/support. And if you support any of these projects, you will get invited to movie nights in the supporter Discord. You will get invited to join our supporter Zooms if you would like. You will get invited to our 2 weekly Zoom calls that we do every single week. You'll get invited to Bitchcraft. You'll get invited to all the things we do as a community. But you do have to be a member on one of those platforms in order to get invited. So whatever way works best with you is fine. And I really do appreciate the support. It's what allows me to do this as a full-time job, which is no mean feat. And I can't do it without you guys. And I definitely appreciate it. Well, today we have an awesome guest. Now, I was not familiar with Brian until he reached out to me to interview for his podcast, which is called Searching for Political Identity. And I got to tell you guys, I did this interview last week. It's currently, you can see I'm episode number 86 right at the top. So I would encourage everyone to go listen to it. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Brian on the channel is, to be honest, this is one of the best interviews I've had in a while. I've been interviewed by a lot of people, guys. By a lot of people from Glenn Beck, Dave Rubin, etc., 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 etc. I've been on like all the shows, and I got to tell you, I enjoyed my chat with Brian more than almost any other interview I've ever done. It was laid back, it was casual. I felt like he was asking really good questions, and it made me curious about what his search for political identity was. And so I invited him on the channel, I think around 1 a.m. last night. And by the time we woke up this morning, we decided he was going to come on today. So that turned around rather quickly. And before I bring him on, let me just read his bio for you. Brian's day job is a construction manager. He graduated from the University of San Diego School of Law in 2022. Congratulations on that. He was a night program guy. He started his podcast searching for political identity while completing his final year of law school. So what we know about Brian already is he does things the hard way, and I totally get that, and I totally respect it, because I did things the hard way too, and I think you build a lot of character doing it that way. The podcast is Brian's passion project. It's all about making connections with interesting people from diverse backgrounds, listening to them speak about important issues, and trying to find out where he stands. Brian has always voted for Democrats. Will that change? Well, you guys know my political journey is that I left the Democratic Party and I will never vote for Democrats again, but I also won't vote for Republicans again. So I am equally against both of the two main parties. So we're going to have a chat with Brian today and learn about his political journey. Brian, welcome to the channel. I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Well, I'm really thrilled that we get to continue the conversation and I get to learn a little bit more about you. So how would you characterize yourself right now politically?
Yeah, there's really no way to get into this without telling the 30-second story, which is that I grew up in a liberal household, influenced by my parents, as I think many people are, not all, but many, and grew up, taught that the Democratic Party was the party of compassion. And when you grow up in a liberal house, you just associate the Democrats with that. And I said, hey, I'm a Democrat. I'm going to vote for Democrat. So Barack Obama was so inspiring. I voted for him twice. And then Hillary, I think, is a brilliant woman. And so she got my vote. And then Joe, see, that one was trickier, but I couldn't, Trump didn't get my vote. He didn't reach out and get me. So how do I identify myself? As searching. In law school, you really get to get exposed to the conservative arguments. I think by nature, law school is a conservative place because you're learning about the history of the law that was. So by nature, I think you're kind of learning conservative arguments. And I said, hey, that makes sense to me. Separation of power, federalism. What are these principles? So basically, I'm just saying, what are the principles that a Democrat believes in? What are the principles that a Republican believes in, and so on? And which ones do I respect? And really, it's a desire. My brain wants to just pick a principled position and then apply the facts to all of those and say, easy. But some people say you got to go issue by issue. Mm-hmm. So I think I respect Trumpism a lot. I respect MAGA a lot. It all makes perfect sense to me. It doesn't seem racist or anti-Semitic to me at all. And the big thing is the culture war. And in my last year of law school, I took 2 really amazing social justice classes and was hit over the head with critical race theory. And I was exposed to it at the entry to law school too, at the orientation. It was very strange. And I always thought checking the box for your race when you had to apply for this or that was strange. So that's who I am. I'm an individual. I like individualism. And I believe the culture war is real. And I'm trying to reevaluate, hey, what is the most compassionate position to take? Is it liberalism as defined by modern day? Is it progressivism? Or in fact, is it conservatism where a hands-off approach is actually better for people? So
might I interest you in libertarianism?
Yeah, sell me on it.
Yeah, well, maybe let's put a needle in that one for a second. I think maybe you'll get there at some point. But maybe
Yeah.
we can talk a little bit about that today. But I want to, so you said that your core value is kind of like that you want to be compassionate. What does that mean to you?
I want freedom. So I do
Mm.
hold freedom as the higher value, and I'm not sure that people today do. So some people choose equity over freedom. But for me, freedom is simple, and it's just that all people have basic rights and so on and so forth. But it becomes a question of line drawing. Where do you draw the line for gay rights? Where do you draw the line for reproductive rights? So it's not so simple. But compassion means to me that it does need to pass a certain smell test. In law school, you get exposed to the legal analysis and all the rules, but then at the end of the day, everything is a smell test. And if it's disgusting and despicable, you don't want it. So compassion, I want to live in a world where everyone has the most opportunity.
Mm.
I want people who are going to soup kitchens year after year, not serving in them, but to eat. I want those people to have the best opportunity. And I recognize there's so many complicated issues: homelessness, immigration, healthcare. I mean, you name it. So the progressive instinct is to want to solve it all from the top down. And so I think that is the progressive instinct, is the government can just swoop in and fix it all and raise the standard of living for everyone. So compassion to me is I want the standard of living for everyone to get better because mine is so good and I'm so fortunate. So which party is most able to raise the standard of living for everyone? Is it going to be the Democrats with their top-down big government, or is it the conservatives? And I am not a business guy. I'm not a numbers guy. It's why I went to law school. But I'm like, you know what? The conservatives might have some arguments here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'll say this. I think one of the eye-opening things for me was that, we talked about this on your podcast, but I cried when Trump was elected in 2016, and one of the reasons I did is I had a thriving organizational psychology practice, and I was like, Trump's gonna ruin the economy and he's gonna destroy my business, and that didn't happen. In fact, I started making more money than I had ever been making in my life, and that was definitely one of the things I was like, hang on a second. Like, Trump's doing something right because I have business booked out a year and a half in advance. And I'm not cheap as an organizational psychologist. And it was just like, he's not destroyed the economy. Like, what else
Oh,
don't I know?
yeah.
And so that was one of the things that was eye opening for me about that.
Yeah. So the thing on Trump, I'm in San Diego. I've been in San Diego for almost 10 years now. I come from the East Coast, Jersey. And I have some friends and family who are wealthy people, socialites in New York, business people, and they know Trump. And like so many people who are in that category, they don't like Donald Trump and they don't respect Donald Trump. Without getting further into that, there is some connection with the Kushners. It's kind of interesting. So I actually have a familial obligation to, right? So I'm in an interesting position where I know the rumors and the word about him is that he was a very unethical businessman who shafted people, yada, yada, yada. And he was a joke and a mattress salesman and a steak seller. Okay, whatever. At the same time, the second he came down from the escalator in, I guess it was late 2015, I remember I was walking around a grocery store on the phone with my dad, who's just a super political, into politics, liberal, but independent minded. And I said, Dad, this guy's got a chance. This guy's got a chance. I saw from the beginning. He was a fascinating character. And I respect anyone who gets elected president. Man, I mean, that takes talent.
Yeah, for real.
So I was disgusted by a lot of his comments. At the same time, I was always intrigued. I thought he was hilarious. I think he's hilarious. And I believe he's a very talented, interesting guy, despite all his flaws and shortcomings. So when he, during his presidency, I got to say, I thought he was a fine president. Inflammatory comments. Now, he didn't get my vote. He didn't reach out to me. So he wasn't the person but I believe he could have, but he didn't. So I thought he was a decent president. And he took a lot of hell, and he caused a lot of hell, but he took a lot of hell. And for me, the word to describe Trump in history's eyes will be irony, because
Mhm.
he created all this hell, but he also got a lot of hell. And so, chicken or egg, who started it? Probably him, but the media wasn't fair to him. Got a lot of free media. People say he got so much free media. Well, he did, but they also weren't fair.
Right.
So he's an interesting figure to me.
I've talked about this with in my locals community or my community calls where, I remember the last community call I had before Trump left office, and there were people crying on that call, and I think I might have been one of them because it was like, I think our perspective was how much could he have done if the media hadn't been on him every day, all day over the most unfair things.
Yeah.
What if people had actually given him a shot to be
Mhm.
president and they weren't trying to undermine him from every possible turn from day one? And it wasn't even just the media, it was also, the establishment. I don't know how far along you are on kind of like your red pill of like seeing how everything works, but like, one of the problems from my perspective was not just the media backlash to Trump, but it was about the people in his own government working against him every single day, even within the Republican Party. The Republican Party hates Donald Trump more than almost anyone else on the planet. And I think
What
that
do you
that
think
was
that is?
because he's anti-establishment. I think that from my perspective, and I actually one of the questions I want to ask you is like, what is your perception of the Democrat and the Republican Party? And hopefully, without influencing you, I will say that my perspective is that the Democrat and Republican Party are exactly the same.
Mhm.
They might bicker here and there about issues,
Yeah.
but at their core, I think they are exactly the same. And that's why I love what's going on in the House of Representatives right now, because this is a middle finger by the Republican base to the Republican Party, who doesn't listen to them at all. And they're saying, "No, we don't want you to be the Democrats any longer." And that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Why
And
do you
so,
think Trump is? And I'm not a master of the minutia of the
yeah.
political, but I love the theories
Mhm.
but I do know that Trump backed McCarthy, right? So
Yeah.
maybe just to humiliate him.
I don't know why Trump backed McCarthy. Trump has been making a lot of weird decisions lately. I basically question everything that Trump has said and done all year at this point, and I say that with a great appreciation for Trump. I like you, like I think Trump is hilarious. I think
Right.
the most hilarious possible outcome of the 2024 nominating process is that Trump gets nominated again, and who the heck knows who the Democrats are going to put up, but maybe it would be Hillary, and I think that would
Mm.
that would just be incredible. Um,
What did we
I
learn?
don't know.
Nothing, people.
Well, no, but that's the thing is like they don't learn anything. They don't learn anything. Um,
Mm.
so what is your current perception of both the Democrat and the Republican Party?
Yeah, for no reason other than I don't like associating with big groups. I in 2012 changed to a independent. I became a registered independent, and I've continued to vote Democrat. Um, I think I focus a lot of the on the woke left because it concerns me, like I think you do as well. But I
Yeah.
do have to acknowledge, as you do, that there's a woke right too. So being fair to both parties, there's an extreme on both sides. Um, it's hard to say at any moment, how much in control of each party the extreme is. Um, yeah, so libertarianism does make sense to me. Look, the Democrats, they're for big government, they're for spending, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not trying to just parrot random words, and I'm not an expert, but during the pandemic, they just continued to spend money. And even in as a layman, it's like questionable whether or not that was a good idea. So the Democrats do throw money at things. They fundamentally believe that big government. They fundamentally believe that we're in a different place than we were when the country was established, and that the operating system that is our Constitution isn't really that applicable these days. And the Republicans make more of an effort to play within the lines of the Constitution, and that's appealing to me. So just on a rules-based organizational sense, And that's what the Democrats do too, progressives. And I'm not knocking them, but I'm just saying they pursue their progressive policies by any means necessary, any legal means necessary, including litigation in the Supreme Court. And the Republicans just don't like to do things that way. They would just rather legislate. And here we are now with legislation on marriage rights and abortion, which is where it should have been all along.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sympathetic to the conservative argument that said, the Scalia argument that said, look, wasn't it Scalia that basically said democracy is manifested at the state level?
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want 9 people in black robes saying this is a right, that isn't a right. So I like process. And I tweeted the other day and people kept saying, I think you've got it completely backwards, Brian. But I think this makes sense. The conservatives see government and all its machinery designed to prevent tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the progressives see all that machinery and the gears and the clockwork of government as a impediment to progress. So, if you say the Democrats have the progressive policies and the Republicans conservatives, yeah, maybe I'm a libertarian who believes that each state should have the right to decide and each person should have the freedom to live where they want to live. It's tough. It's tough because you want to recognize the role of religion. I know I'm not answering your question at all, but it's all about religion, the culture war, right? Religion and atheism has such a huge role to play in this conversation. And, we're not a religious country. Well, how do you phrase it, right? So much of our rights are based on a creator. And so the line, I'm not a Christian nationalist. I'm Jewish. I'm a very reformed Jew. But I just looked at the comment. Yes, I want the D. I'm in the closet. Maybe. But, better D. Not that Biden's so bad, but come on, give me someone who can really talk to me.
And listen, guys, it's fine if Brian ends up as a Democrat. It's fine if like I want to be really clear for people in my chat. This is not contrary to popular belief. People can come on my channel and disagree with me, and it's going to be okay because everyone's on their own journey. I personally think that Brian's going to end up as a libertarian at some point. Maybe not right this second, but maybe at some point down the road. But we'll see. Wherever he ends up is fine. I think that. For me, I am concerned that the Democrat Party, as it stands right now, is an unsavable institution. I don't think that any amount, because I think that they've been taken over by critical theory, by social justice, by this woke progressive ideology. And although I don't think that every single Democrat is evil, although I was thrilled that Kristen Sinema left the party because I actually really like Kristen Sinema a lot. Yeah, I don't agree with everything she does, but I was thrilled to see her get out of there. I was thrilled that Tulsi Gabbard left the party, even though Tulsi Gabbard then went and endorsed a war hawk, which makes me question her motives.
Who did she endorse? I didn't see that.
Oh, he's a Don Bulldog. It's like a New Hampshire thing. He was running for Senate in New Hampshire, and so that's a whole long story. But yeah, I kind of think that she's disingenuous too. But it's just I think I don't mind everyone in the Democratic Party. I understand, as I grew up in Vermont, so I grew up in a very liberal environment myself. I think that what a lot of people need to wrap their heads around, though, is that the party has just changed irreparably. And I don't think there's any saving it. And, I would kind of almost say the Republican Party has their own problems, but for different reasons.
Yeah. I was exposed to critical race theory in law school very explicitly, and I was uncomfortable with it. Honestly.
Let's talk about that. How were you aware of any of this stuff before you were exposed to it in law school?
That's a great question. I think I was, like most people, aware of a trend line in society where equity and inclusion and diversity are these words that you're hearing more. And, Jerry Seinfeld used to have this, and he's a questionable, people think he's a strange guy, right? But he had a saying once that said, talking about diversity and quotas, racial quotas, the concept of racial quotas. And this goes back to affirmative action and what I was saying about checking boxes for institutions. He said, there's nothing funny about if I'm going to put together a show and I'm going to do a comedy show. I am not thinking I need 2 black people and 2 Asians and 2 women. I mean, come on. So that's really where it starts for me about critical race theory. You're either focusing on outcomes or you're focusing on like humanity and treatment. And that does kind of put me on the right side of the culture war with you and Ben Shapiro and Dr. Jordan Peterson and all these other people. That's at least where my gut goes to. So was I aware of what critical race theory? Not in the way I am now, because I got the premier education on it. It was wonderful. And there's a lot of good things to it. And the summary I have for it is critical race theory. What they want you to do is put a pair of glasses on that's tinted through their lens. And you want to see and that's okay. It's useful. But you can't live with those glasses on. And it's the simplest way I could describe it. And it is victimization. And there's a room for conversation about reparations and how Black people were systematically denied access to generational wealth. Yes. But the ongoing, nonstop, pervasive in every domain of life of oppression, the claim of oppression, it's I don't see it. And I hear about it in school. And when I was so I was 31, 32 in these law classes, about 10 years older, and with work and life experience to my students. And there was so interesting, an amazing Black professor who I'm actually meeting for lunch in a week, which I'm really excited about, hoping to get him on my podcast. But he wrote so many books on this stuff, and he went to school with Clarence Thomas. He went to Yale Law with Clarence Thomas and Alito and the Clintons, and so many interesting things to talk about there. But the class, there was one Black man, a bunch of white people, a bunch of people from different of other ethnicities as well, Asian. So it's a diverse class. And man, I felt attacked as a white guy. I'm Jewish, all right? But I felt attacked.
Oh, you're not. You don't get oppression points for being Jewish. Unless it's convenient for them.
So I'm just like, man, maybe it's because I've been on a construction site for 10 years with guys showing up to work every day and just working. And it's like a locker room in the NFL, I imagine, or a pirate ship, or wherever. You just show up in the work. It's about the work. And so I've been, and now I have students telling me, you can't say boyfriend, girlfriend, you have to say partner. And look, I support the LGBTQ plus movement, community, because I believe they're genuine. I believe they're mostly authentic, and I'm going to support people. I'm not going to say you don't have a real point of view. I'm just not going to do that. Now, where you draw the lines, open conversation. So this professor led the effort to put the transgender signs on all the bathrooms. It was a Christian university. So just very, very interesting scene. And the reason I brought up the demographic racially of the class was for all the progressives that were in there and all the patriarchy shitting on that was going on, and all the white guilt that was being foisted on the class, and which is why I found myself playing the role of Ted Cruz. And I launched my podcast, Searching for Political Identity, in my last year of law school, in my first of these two classes. So I said, am I Ted Cruz or am I my father's son? Like, who am I? So anyway, the one Black student was a conservative, and he came from a military background, and he was on his way to become a prosecutor. The one thing that we were being taught to, was like the devil, the government, the system. So how did I grow up loving Rage Against the Machine, Tupac, and growing up the way I did, with an awareness and sensitivity to poverty, and you put it all together, and it's like, I kind of think that I might agree with you that, and so I don't think I was noticing all this in 2012 when I switched to an independent, but now, yeah, I think I would be more comfortable in the Republican Party, to be honest with you, because of this initial base concept of, are we individuals or are we blocks of people? Why every political season do we talk about racial demographics? Why do we check these boxes when we're applying for colleges? Now, look, the counter argument, the progressive argument is, we know what it is. People listening are smart, you're smart, and we're informed. We know the counter argument is. The well-intentioned counter argument, the moderate Democrat progressive would say, look, these are countermeasures that are needed to remedy historical injustice in our society, which is indisputable. and you're an a-hole if you dispute it.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Crow, the whole nine. And so certain measures for a certain period of time. I think Sandra Day O'Connor in one of the affirmative action majority opinion said that, this needs to sunset. Obviously, logically, there's an endpoint. But many of the progressives do seem to have this energy about them where it's like, man, no end in sight. I'll tell you when we're good. As you told me on my show the other day with Ibram X. Kendi's point of view of like, no, you need to feel the pain.
Oh, yeah. Let me ask you this. So I developed my understanding of critical race theory and critical theory in general, not so much from like listening to very smart people like James Lindsay or Helen Pluckrose or any of those people. I developed it because I have watched thousands of hours of their training exercises, of their corporate training, of their classes, of their college lectures, of their education for teachers and stuff like that. And so I use that to kind of like really get an understanding of how their ideology is manifesting in the real world, because I'm less interested in theory than I am in actually like how does it impact real people's lives. And based on that, I came up with a definition of critical race theory. And I want to tell you my definition of critical race theory, and I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong based on your premier law school education. Is that okay?
Exciting, yeah.
All right. My definition of critical race theory is that critical race theory that was an ideology that was developed in the 1970s in academia that says racism exists everywhere, in every person, in everything, in every interaction. And the job of the critical theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism occurs in every experience, because racism is always presumed to have occurred.
That's interesting. I think I think that's right in most ways. I think not so much the way I heard it is not so much that it is necessarily always inherent everywhere, but that it is inherent here still in this system. That actually, this is really interesting. And now the class is kind of come back. Yeah, and I won't remember it all, so I'm not going to try to do that. But basically, the point is, the critical race theorist says the 60s, the civil rights movement was inadequate. It was just inadequate, man. In fact, the critical race theorist would say that the civil rights movement was an act of appeasement and integration.
Martin Luther King didn't go far enough because he didn't go for equity. He only went for equality.
Now, actually, my professor, when I asked, of course, being the Ted Cruz that I was in the class, I said, what about MLK? And the whole concept, he goes, no, MLK would be a critical race theory. Okay. So we didn't get into that, but conceptually, it doesn't seem that way. So critical race theory is all about assimilation. So whereas you defined it as there always being this constant inherent racism in all humans everywhere, and we must therefore have systems and society and structures in place that naturally adjust for that and account for that. Here, I think critical race theory is saying, especially in America, look, imagine you have a black woman and a white woman who are going to rent an apartment together, and the white woman gets there on December 1st and moves all her shit in and decorates the apartment. The black woman doesn't get there until a month later, but the lease only started on January 1st, so black woman was right on time. She did nothing wrong, but all the furniture and all the setup is now the way the white woman wanted it. Well, does the black woman have a right to rearrange the furniture? Yeah, probably. So the question is there such a thing as black culture and white culture? And this is what it gets down to. And is there such thing as a white mind and a black mind? Critical race theorists say yes. There is such a thing as a black mind and a white mind. And you can have a black mind and a white body and vice versa. And that's what Clarence Thomas is. This is what they say. And so critical race theory, how it was explained to me, it can on one hand be simply said, the furniture example, the poker chips example, where you start the game and one person has all the chips and the other person doesn't have any chips. But really, if you were to ask me, I would say, look, critical race theory is the idea that despite having, and this is the answer, despite having race-neutral laws and race-neutral systems as we do today, we still have a racist system and racist outcomes. And if you look at the stats and the data, they will say the data suggests that we still have racist outcomes. And that's where the colorblind society being the racist tool comes in. Let's say, no, I'm colorblind, man. It's cool. No, and then they'll say the critical race theory, say that's the problem. You being colorblind, trained by the civil rights movement to be colorblind, you're missing the entire game. You're missing the fact that Black culture was oppressed and erased, and now you want us to assimilate. And so to your point about capitalism and whiteness, absolutely. The argument from the critical race theorists is that assimilating into the melting pot of America is caving into white culture. And that
so they want to embed stereotypes forever and ever and ever and ever and ever.
They want to create spaces. And actually, fascinating, as we learned critical race theory, which I guess was created by Derek Bell in Harvard in the 80s. So it was explained to me. Derek Bell, apparently on his deathbed, as I was told by my professor, apparently rejected critical race theory because it was ineffective. He said it'll never, and he embraced something called limited separation, which is fascinating. I'll tell it to you in 1 second. You have to hear about this if you haven't.
I have not heard about this.
Limited separation is the next evolution of the thought because they failed. The critical race theory said, we failed. Critical race theory can only succeed if a sufficient amount of white people buy into it, and it ain't happening. So the limited, okay, now it's all coming back to me. Yeah, fascinating. And then and I'll tie in limited separation, and I'll do it quickly. I was explained that there are basically 4 types of civil rights approaches that you could have in reverse order, because that's what's in my mind now. It's limited separation, critical race theory, reformism, and traditionalism. Okay, so traditionalism. So you can only have 4 thoughts, 4 approaches to the civil rights and racist movement, people. You only fall into one of these 4 categories, listeners. You're either a traditionalist, a progressive, traditionalist, reformist, critical race theorist, or a limited separation. The traditionalist is the conservative, the Clarence Thomas, the Samuel Alito, the Ted Cruz, the Jim Jordan. The American system we have in 2022 is freedom-based. It's legit. It is not racist. It rejects this critical race theory line, and it says, you're an asshole if you say Larry Elder is a white supremacist. And it's all about the meritocracy. It's the standard conservative line that I think, and that's kind of, that's pretty clear. Traditionalist says the civil rights movement got it right. Done. And its work is done. Pretty simple. The reformist says, no, there's still some work to do. And that there was great work done, but there's still some work to do. And there's still some tinkering in our system to do. And I'll pause real quick and say, I always think about political identity in my search of, I think of America as a house, and I'm in the construction industry. So what are you going to do? Are we going to do some light remodeling? Is it a full gut? Are we tearing it down? And so that's how I think about America and where I'm searching for my political identity. But anyway, so the traditionalist says, it's good, man. It's perfect. We can sell this damn house as is. It's perfectly good. The reformist says we need to do a light remodel. There's some tinkering to the structure, but not to the structure that we need to do.
You know, like change out the tiles in the bathroom and put some new carpet down in the bedroom, stuff like that. Yeah.
Pretty simple, right? That's the reformist. So you might get some progressives in there. Who in the public might that fall into? Arguably a Barack Obama even, but pick a moderate Democrat.
Oh, I don't think Barack Obama's a reformist. I think Barack Obama's a critical race theorist.
So anyway, that's reformism. Then you get into critical race theory, which my professor always said is reformism on steroids. Critical race theory says, and there's all these ways to define critical race theory. Here's another one. Critical race theory says a systemic response is needed. So we can't tinker around the edges. We have to basically demo, a full demo, the whole thing. At least ripping all the framing out. So critical race theory says we need reforms. Not only are reforms still needed, but we need structural reforms.
Some might call that a revolution.
Yeah.
Of the Marxist variety.
I think that absolutely fits within that definition. So absolutely, structural change is needed because the work isn't done, and it can't get done with progressive reformism. It ain't enough. It just, we need a systemic change to combat the systemic racism. It's not, so they do claim that it's for to fight racism, but they tie the classism and the racism, and that's where the lines get blurred. Right. But critical race theory, yeah, just says this progressive is too weak, and we have a race problem in this country, whether you see it or not. We're telling you we do, and so we need to reform the whole thing. Derek Bell on his deathbed apparently said, guys, we failed. And so what's the only next step? Well, limited separation.
So it's like basically segregation. Is that what we're talking about?
My hand went up. I said, Professor, that sounds like limited segregation. No, it is not. It is distinct from segregation in a specific way. And I think I can pull it out of my ass and give you the definition. It is not segregation because you can have people from the other groups, from outside of groups in, but there is a rule. There is a rule that's you can't jeopardize. You can't have 51%. You have to maintain 51% of that minority group. So limited separation says we got to do our own black fire stations, black schools, black everything, black infrastructure, and black. No, I'm serious. And it's really.
They're redoing separate but equal. They're redoing separate but equal. I think I heard about this from someone else not too long ago, actually.
Yeah, separate but equal. But with the twist of you can join this group, and we can't turn you down on racial means. So there is a legitimate philosophical rule-based approach to it that makes it palatable. But you go, do we want those enclaves? Is that sensible, good? I don't think so, right?
I think it sounds like a horrible idea that's going to lead to more racism, not less. And you know, I mean, and the conservatives know this better than anyone, because the conservatives have tried to build up their own parallel society. And I, by the way, think that's a stupid idea too. I think it's like I don't know, like if you were around when this started happening, but like, you know, in after like during 2020 and like definitely in 2021, the conservatives are like, we need to build everything ourselves. We need to build our own payment processors. We need to build our own entertainment companies. We need to build all our own social media, all this stuff. And they were doing the same thing. And guess what? Most of the conservative like solutions, the parallel economy, suck. They suck really bad, because it's like there are solutions that are already working, and then they're going and trying to reinvent the wheel to make their own parallel solution, but they don't quite do it correctly. They don't have the experience behind it. They don't have the money behind it. They don't have the manpower to be able to build something up quickly to compete with like a Twitter, or compete with Facebook, or compete with PayPal, or compete with Stripe, or any of these things. Now they've built some stuff. I'm not going to lie. Like there is some conservative parallel economy stuff that exists, but none of it's really that good. And I would think that if the Black community tried to do like something similar, like building their own limited separation economy, it would kind of be the same end result. And that's not to say that, you know, the progressive Black community isn't, you know, I'm not saying that they're incapable of doing these things, because human beings are capable of whatever they put their mind to. It's not a race thing. It's more like an experience thing, and a manpower thing, and a money thing. And you know this, like, I mean, from construct, like if you don't have the people to build the house with the right experience, and you have to hire kind of like
the market, you don't build if there's no market, first of all, right? And you can't force things. And so do you want to, it's social engineering. That would be social engineering, I think. But you know, so many people, and even I, honestly, look, I support the LGBT community. I'll say it again. I go to their events. I donate, because I really do. I'm also sympathetic to people who are into religious freedom and who are uncomfortable. I am honestly sympathetic to people who are uncomfortable with even still homosexual. You can't write people off.
Right.
I don't have any room for hate, but I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and we're living in a lot of different worlds with fractured society. Um, People are living in different realities,
Mhm.
and maybe leadership is rising above that and trying to take people out of that, as opposed to staying hands off and saying let the chaos run. But yeah,
I mean, I think I want to ask you more about the LGBTQ stuff in a second because I have mixed feelings about that as well, to be honest. But I want to take this question from Justin first, my friend Justin O'Donnell, who apparently was on your podcast, and he says, "Ask Brian about
wow.
that time that me and Chase made him put a trigger warning on his own podcast. What happened there?"
Yeah, I it was like my 10th episode or something, and I get hooked up with Justin and Chase, great guys, I think, and they were just messing with me, and I don't know, they were like making me feel like Sarah Palin, because they were like, where do you? What's your political identity? What do you read? I was like, I read all sorts of things. I read all news, and they're like laughing at me. Um, but Justin was talking about the Boston Marathon, and he was like working at it, and he was just like, and he was also at the January 6th, or his friends were at January 6th, 2021. So there's a lot of terrorism going on related to Justin's life. So,
Justin is not a terrorist. Justin is not a terrorist.
right. Well, yeah, I think he claimed to be one in his bio.
That's something that he would do.
Sarcasm.
That's something he would do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, man, I don't know. I don't want to get canceled.
No, Justin is a shit poster extraordinaire, but he
Yeah.
is he is
He's a
not.
brilliant guy. No, I think he's
He really
brilliant.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, really informed. Just the type of person I was trying to meet with, and so I appreciate him. Yeah.
He knows absolutely everything. I'll tell you what, like, I'm involved with him in, like, the libertarian community in New Hampshire. He knows everything. If you have a
Yeah.
question about anything, like, New Hampshire related or frankly libertarian related, Justin may be an asshole, and he will self-describe himself as an asshole, but he is an asshole that knows absolutely everything, so I think he's invaluable.
Yeah, and he points out he described himself as a domestic
Yeah,
extremist, not a
he does.
terrorist. Fair enough.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
he just wants to burn down the entire government,
yeah.
figuratively.
Where does
Yeah.
Justin get so well informed? How does he become so up on politics? And
I mean,
you,
I
how do you
think
do
that
it?
well, I think that like the libertarian community, you kind of like you learn a lot of stuff through osmosis, and I think Justin is one of those people that's just been around a long time. He's read a lot, he's talked a lot to a lot of people. He knows like everyone, and I think it's just one of those things where like you learn over time by osmosis. A lot of
Mm,
it, I think my journey is the same. Is like I went from knowing probably quite frankly to being in a very similar state that you were where I was like, I'm really unhappy with the Democrats. I'm not really on board with the Republicans either. Um, and then I got thrown into this world and I was for me, it was a crash course because like I went from knowing nothing about anything to being on Glenn Beck and Fox
mm,
News in like a week.
mm,
And so it was just like an entire year of this for me where I was just surrounded by all these people that like I had to learn very quickly to in order to be able to speak intelligently because I feel like for the first several months of my red pill journey I was walking around in a haze where I had no idea what was going on and I was just trying to keep up with everything. So I think it's just something that over the course of time you learn where to get your information and you learn who to listen to and you learn who to take with a grain of salt as well. But
mm.
Justin, again, for like all his faults, Justin is someone I always listen to. I don't always agree with him, but I always listen to what he has to say. And even if he's doing stuff that's like tongue in cheek or, a little bit trolly, like he's still making points that I think a lot of people miss. And I think and that's part of the reason why I do like the libertarians. I actually think that the libertarians are the most informed of the top 3 political parties. They read the most, they are the
Mm,
most nuanced in their perspective. They
mm,
are the most principled of all 3. Like the libertarians,
yep,
like they don't budge. Well, sometimes they do budge based on tribalism, but not often. Not as often as you're going to see with the Democrats and the Republicans. So I think it's also just a function of me being around this community. I've had to learn more to keep up. Um, But I want to talk about the LGBTQ thing because I kind of like I agree with you. Like when I first got into, I got involved in politics when I was in high school in Vermont, and at that time they were trying to pass civil unions in Vermont. This was before gay marriage was legalized. And civil unions was like the precursor for gay marriage. And Vermont was the first state in the country to pass civil unions. And I was one of those people like knocking on doors and doing that sort of thing. And it was like not like I got heat for that when I did it, man. I remember it. But that was something that I always believed in. It's like, gay people should have the same rights as non-gay people. Like, and it was easy. This was in the 90s. So it was like this just made sense. And it didn't make sense to me why they couldn't get married, like love is love sort of thing. And then like, once that passed, and then I was really excited when gay marriage got like, blessed by the Supreme Court. I was like, okay, this is done now. Gay people can get married. Like, let's all move on with life. But it didn't end there, and they just kept going and going and going. And I can understand, like, I don't want people to be treated differently because of who they love. I think who you have sex with is probably one of the least interesting things about you, if I'm honest. And I don't want trans people to be treated differently. I think that, trans people should be able to live their lives. And I have no issue with, people transitioning, whether it be social or whether they have surgery. Where I started to have a problem with it was when they were trying to perform surgeries on kids. And it started from purely a psychological perspective for me, because I'm like, your brain doesn't fully evolve until you're in your early to mid 20s. Like, you cannot make decisions about cutting off body parts when you're 15 years old and going through puberty. That doesn't even make sense. And so I don't have any problem with like the LGBT movement or people or any of that. I do have a problem with the way that the activism wing is showing up, particularly in schools. And that's where I start to have problems. But then on the right, and I'm going to give you a chance to respond in a second. On the
Oh yeah,
right, you're taking it all in. Um, what I see like coming out of like so with the conservatives and the Republicans, during 2020, they were all like, it's a big tent, everyone's welcome, gay people are welcome, trans people are welcome, everyone is welcome in our big tent. And then the minute that Joe Biden left, or that Joe Biden got into office, that tune started to change. And there was and people don't remember this, but I do, because I was one of the ones getting hit with it, because they all think I'm a lesbian because of my haircut. Like, so there was this whole movement right after Joe Biden came into office where they were basically saying, if you're LGBTQ, get the F out of our movement. You don't belong in the MAGA movement. You don't belong in our party. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like 3 months ago, you guys were like courting these people, and now you're kicking people out of your party based on who they love and who they sleep with. That doesn't make sense. And I also think that there has been a lot where I think we're approaching a moral panic with like the drag issue and the grooming. And I say that as someone who does not approve of some of the things going on in schools. I really don't. I mean, I believe that grooming is a real thing. I believe that I personally wouldn't take kids to drag shows. I certainly don't want my tax dollars going to pay for drag shows in schools. I think, but the moral panic on all of this is just starting to get a little bit much for me. And so I find myself in between these two places where I'm like, I don't care if someone's gay or trans at all. It makes no difference to me at all. At the same time, like, I want people to be able to, if they want to go to a drag show in their spare time, who the hell cares? It's it. People are allowed to screw up their kids. Like,
right.
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I find myself in this in between area as well, where I'm like, both of
No,
y'all are
no.
crazy. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think this all connects. It's all connected to what you think morality, how you define morality. Um, I got a girlfriend who loves the trans community, trans culture, going to drag shows. I went to one. It was a great time. I'm liberal, right? Socially
Mhm.
liberal. So that's all cool by me. Of course, I am uncomfortable also about puberty. You talk about puberty blockers and hormone therapy. Well, if you accept that trans people are real and that transgenderism is a real condition, um, don't you then have to accept that there are trans kids? And if there are trans kids, is it not sensible and potentially medically, morally appropriate to allow that in certain circumstances. That's one line of logic that presents itself. Another line of logic is we have a age of majority in this country. It's 18, and to allow that kind of thing is crazy. Before that, and just morally wrong, like the smell test. So, how do you define a moral society? And do you believe the state government and federal government can put rules in place to create that moral? And I guess the libertarians would say no, they don't, and the government has no role.
It is the idea of the government dictating to me what I can and cannot do and what I can and cannot believe from a moral perspective is probably one of the more terrifying ideas I can think of.
Yeah. So it sounds like Jon Stewart had the better of that argument when he had that viral exchange with, I think it was an AG in some state. And remember, he went viral a couple months ago, and Jon Stewart basically said, who is the government to step in to these medical professionals and parents and say, no, you shouldn't do this? And then critics of conservatives will say, I thought the conservatives weren't for big government. But this is a moral issue, and sometimes morality trumps all else, and they think it's immoral. And so you have to, so it all ties with religious freedom and religious freedom and the concept of liberty in America, because hasn't the concept of liberty in America, and I say this as a big fan of it and a proponent of it, doesn't it include Satanism? Mustn't it include many diverse ideologies and some that, because if a religion is a supposedly moral thing, well, what if someone else's morality doesn't align with you? Okay, so it's pretty simple stuff, right? So what do you do in America where you're supposed to have this freedom culture? Now all of a sudden the conservatives, they're not looking so, it's small government from a fiscal perspective, and that matters probably, but a moral perspective. So trans, moral panic. Yeah, I think it is approaching a moral panic. On the other hand, to sound like a fence sitter, and why I'm searching for political identity and not committed to one side is because there is a lot of inappropriate stuff going on, right? Mm-hmm. But if you believe that trans is real, some of it has to be allowed. So it's like, where are the lines drawn?
And I think that's kind of why you've kind of outlined for me why the only viable path forward for me is like libertarianism. And because it's like, again, like my objection to the trans stuff, particularly in schools, is twofold. Number one, oftentimes schools are teaching this when the parents don't even know that they're teaching it, and they're teaching it from a really young age, right? So they're teaching it starting in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, basically before kids are 8 years old. And if you teach a kid anything before 8 years old, that is going to cement in their brain, and it is going to be almost impossible to get it out. So this is like less a moral thing for me than the public schools are using our tax dollars to teach children that they're non-binary when they're in elementary school, when the kids very literally have no ability to defend themselves because their brain is not developed to a place where they are able to defend themselves. So that to me is a breach of if you believe that children, that parents should be raising their kids, which I think that it's a pretty hard argument it's pretty hard to argue against the idea that like parents should be in charge of raising their kids, right? And then you've got the school system coming in and inserting stuff into the kids' brains without even telling the parents what's going on. I have an issue with that. I also have an issue with schools prescribing medication to kids without parents knowing, which absolutely has happened. And I think that there's an argument to be made for the fact that, I had to wait until I was 18 to pierce my tongue. There are kids right now that are cutting off body parts
Yeah.
before they are able to vote or buy cigarettes or drink alcohol. And it's like, if you want to let them socially transition, cut off their hair, wear baggy clothes, change their name to Fred, whatever, like, I don't really care. Like, I think that people experiment with their identity. I think that, throughout history, people have experimented with what gender means. It's like we've all forgotten what David Bowie was, it's like these are real things. And I have no problem with any of that. I do have a problem when the state tries to insert itself to take kids away from their parents when parents don't want to get their kids puberty blockers or things like that. But insofar as, like, do I think that parents bringing kids to drag shows should be outlawed? No, I don't, because I don't think it's a good idea. It
Right.
wouldn't personally be the choice I would make, but as you said, like, freedom means freedom, and liberty means liberty. And again, if people want to screw up their kids, I think that most parents, and that this is true of parents, I definitely think this is true of conservative parents. I think that most people probably do things that screw up their kids a lot worse than taking them to a drag show on a Sunday afternoon, if I'm
Yeah.
honest about it. And so, like, liberty only means liberty. It only really works when you fight for people to be able to do things that you would disagree with. My biggest problem comes in is when we, the taxpayers, are paying for those things and the state is doing them without being honest about what they're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And that's why I appreciate the work you're doing, because you're showing people the receipts for the fact that this stuff is happening, and right or wrong. I mean, it's just like, I grew up in a nice suburb in New Jersey, and I grew up, despite the fact that I was raised in a liberal household, and I was the American myth was imprinted in my mind. Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
white people, Native Americans, it all worked out.
There's a
Um,
cornucopia involved.
yeah, American exceptionalism. I bought it. I grew up right across from a beautiful park where we played baseball. So I didn't have, like, I had an idyllic childhood from, like, a set and setting perspective, and enough to really like this country and feel good about it. And what you learn taking the social justice classes and digging into critical race theories, that a lot of people don't share that sentiment, and they feel like America is not that, it's something different. And if only it was that, then everything would be great. But it all goes to the youth. And if you believed that there was such a big problem, of course you would try to train children. The reason I brought up my childhood is because, of course, everyone's after the youth.
Mhm.
um, and are we raising a generation of kids to believe that America is a great place, a good place, a bad place, indifferent? That's a valid question. I think, and people will think that this critical race theory stuff and the culture war stuff is overblown, and that it's not really happening, and that it is only happening in universities. Now, I experienced it in a university. I see it on TV. My sense is that it's happening, and I know you have all your
Oh,
projects
yeah.
opposing it. So if you take it to be true that it's happening, you have to ask yourself, what is America to me? Is it a place where great things can happen if you pick yourself up? Or is it a place where you're oppressed unless the system is changed? It's a stark difference. I think that's where a lot of people are.
Oh, I think that's one of the things that's most frustrating to me, because it's like, I'm someone who believes that people can do whatever they put their mind to. But you have to believe in yourself, and you have to, like, inherent to success is and this seems really overly simplistic, so people miss this oftentimes. But in order to be successful, one of the things that's required is that you believe that you can be successful.
Mhm.
Like, I look at the stuff you're doing with your podcast, right? You want to be a podcast host. You have made this abundantly clear. You want to be a podcast host. You are doing the things required to build a podcast, build an audience, to be successful. You're putting your work out there into the world every single day. You wouldn't be doing any of these things if you didn't believe that your goal of being a successful podcast host could be achievable, right? Because then you're just wasting time. It's just like a fool's errand. And so you have to have that belief that you can be successful. I think that one of the things that really pisses me off about what the far left has done in terms of what they are now teaching in schools starting as early as 4 years old, and you're correct that I absolutely do have the documentation to back all this up. They are teaching kids that they cannot be successful in the world. And it's like, if and especially like, young black kids, they are teaching young black kids, you cannot be successful unless white people allow you to be successful.
Yeah,
And
that's
that to me is incredibly offensive to everything that I believe in.
yeah, same here. And that couldn't have said it better. Yeah. So, and part of why this is so, hard for me is, like I said, I grew up and I talk about my background because honestly, as a 33-year-old coming out of my shell finally for the first time, experienced quite a bit of depression, which I now recognize was depression, and a lot of years, although like always having a huge fundamental confidence in myself, like always had it, I was bogged down by a lot of negative feelings for a long time. And I know what it's like to come from a place of privilege and still not be able to still feel like you're floundering, because the bottom line is, if you don't believe, so I have internalized the lesson that if you don't believe in yourself, nothing's gonna happen. Even my failure has taught me that. And I've been exposed to enough one good mentor, a guy who means so much to me, a trainer. Everyone has that one person in their life, hopefully. And this guy, he does the meetups that everyone's doing, the masterminds. You meet at the beach at 5 a.m. and you push yourself, and it's masculinity. And this is really relevant because the culture war. But masculinity and believing in yourself, they're not synonymous by any means, but they're not totally distinct. It does seem like the far left wants to shave off that instinct. Right? Jordan Peterson would certainly agree. So the people that I respect in life, the Teddy Roosevelts, the man in the arena quote, my buddy Jay that I wrote in this issue, we'll talk about Jay, who's a great successful trainer and life coach. What do? They teach you the mindset of success. And I'm not speaking to it from a position of success. I come from a privileged background. That's part of my neurosis. It's like, oh man, I'm so lucky. There are so many people less fortunate for me. I have it good, right? But at the same time, I don't understand how a victim mentality is part of the equation. And I do see that victim mentality is part of the critical race theory programming.
Absolutely.
It just is. And that's why I say part of critical race theory is good, because you can do a lecture on critical race theory and teach someone things and make points about systemic racism and systemic wealth gaps that are very convincing. You can make counter arguments about immigrants from Africa in modern times, all those counter arguments from conservatives. But if you don't take the race-colored glasses off at some point, if you leave them on, and you remain in that mindset that some people are just victims and it ain't going to change unless the system changes. They cannot help themselves. It's troubling. It's hard to swallow.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I want to ask you, so you've done 86 episodes of your podcast now. So you've talked to a lot of people on your journey, and what are some of the things that you've learned about searching for your political identity in terms of doing this show and the people you've spoken to?
I think a lot of people believe that money is the problem. Not necessarily that money itself is the problem or that capitalism is the problem, but that money in politics is the problem. Whether it's a progressive who says, look, lobbying is legal and it's built into our system, but it's a huge problem. It's why, majority, and they want majority rule anyway, but that's why all these progressive policies don't get enacted. Some brilliant conservatives, I've spoken to a lot of libertarian leaning people, and I'm really attracted to libertarianism. One in particular who I've had on several times, this guy E.H. Ivins, he he has a vision called anti-politism. I think it's antipolitism.org. He proposes a whole system of he says only a sociopath would run for office in today's environment.
As someone who accidentally ran for office, I completely agree with that. I would never do it again. Never, ever, ever in my life.
Who finds out that only a sociopath would run for office.
It's true.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
And so both sides would say money is the problem for one reason or another. So what have I learned talking to different people? I've said that money seems to be the thing. And some people think that, if you have money, so classism versus racism, and you know this better than anyone with all your work. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that we have a class problem, or do you believe that we have a race problem? Because you probably have to buy, or do you believe that we actually have a great country that should just, forget all the complainers you have the people who say, look at our rising poverty. Look how many people we've taken out of poverty. Capitalism is the best thing that's ever happened in the world. And you look at poverty around the world if you want to complain about poverty. So not much. I've surveyed the field. I did this while moving, while graduating law school, while my dad nearly dying. So, and I've postponed the bar exam so many times. I'll be taking the bar in July. And once that's behind me, I'll have time to take my podcast to the next level. But so far, it's just been making an effort to keep the thing going and alive. And like I described to people, it's like a pilot light that's lit. It's alive. It's there. Maybe it'll blow up one day, maybe not. But I'm just trying to keep it going for now.
No, I mean, I think like a podcast is hard, man. 86 episodes is no mean feat. I have several different series that I do for content on my channel, and it is a thing to get to the amount of content that you have. So I would just say, like, if you love it, like, stick with it. And I think it'll grow. I think, you said something interesting. Do you like, basically, do you think that we have a country that is divided on race, on class, or we think it's great? I think for me, and I actually, like, I wonder about your answer to this question, but I think for me, I think there's absolutely still real race issues to fix in this country. I think that racism is actually a real thing, not of the systemic variety. I don't believe in systemic racism at all. I think that is, they can't even define it, nor can they point to actual policies that still exist today to basically back up their perspective. So I don't believe in that stuff, but I do believe that there are people that are racist, for lack of a better term. And I do think that there is progress that still needs to be made in that area. So I think that is something. I think that class struggle is a much bigger problem, in that it is significantly harder for someone who has grown up in poverty to believe that they can be successful than it is for someone who's grown up with extremely wealthy parents to believe that they can be successful and to have access to resources. And so I think there are definitely cases to be made there. And I think that's part of one of the things that attracted me to the populism of the MAGA movement, to be honest, because I kind of like I like a populist movement. I think that it is about average people rising up to say, establishment, you will not treat us this way anymore, and demanding what they're paying for with their tax dollars. So I think there's that. I don't think that the country is perfect. I think we're a more perfect union. I just think we're a lot better off, and people have more opportunity here than I think that the Democratic Party wants to admit. I don't think things are perfect. I wouldn't go so far as what the Republican Party does, to say everything is fine, nothing to see here. I don't think that's true either. But I think we're, the country itself is in a pretty good place. I think that the people and the loudest voices on either extremist side tend to be the problem.
Right. And I think that, and then so for me, that almost becomes unhelpful, because it's like, so am I a Democrat or a fucking Republican or a moderate? If they cancel each other out, then I have to go back to the principles and the ideas and the nature of government, and what can I figure out what I believe about the role of government. One thing I want to add, just in case we're wrapping up any minute, is that the professor very successfully, and it's so fascinating, explains and gets you to understand that the founding of our country and the limited government that it was built on is not a valueless proposition. There are values in there. such as that individualism and minimal government are good.
Yeah.
And so it's not that complicated. It's like now you have a different demographic and a different time. And what should the relationship between government and people be? And what is the purpose of government? But they would argue that there is systemic racism today, and they would just say, "Hey, look," they would point to disparities in inequality in wealth and police shootings, and maybe you have data to dispute those. You're very well researched.
Oh, I absolutely
Yeah.
have data to dispute the police shootings. I don't have it off the top of my head though, but
Right,
there
right,
there is data that disputes that. Yeah, for sure.
right on. So yeah, I don't know what the libertarians would do about problem solving, but I guess libertarians are not opposed to solutions.
I don't think we're opposed to solutions. I think we're opposed to government solutions. Is the thing. Here's what I would recommend, Brian. How have you ever heard of Pork Fest?
No.
Okay, so PorkFest, that's PORC as in porcupine, not PORK as in bacon. PorkFest is a libertarian pop-up village that is created in New Hampshire in the last week of June. And I think you should come to PorkFest and hang out with the libertarians. And it's amazing. It is
Yeah.
we basically take over a campground. And there are no police, there are no rules. You can do whatever you want as long as you don't hurt people or take their stuff. It's the safest place you're going to be in your life, even though there's lots of people walking around with guns. Don't let them fool you. There, it's going to be fine. Basically, men at PorkFest wear guns like women wear jewelry, and you can like talk to people and experience what it actually is. And I think if you had time for it and can make the trip out to New Hampshire, and Justin will be there, and we'll provide you with any substance that you want.
Oh,
If you could,
clear my mind.
yeah, well, he'll clear your mind, that's for sure. And
I need that.
and so like I think that might be an interesting experience for you. I can tell you that my first Pork Fest was a couple years ago, and I was baby libertarian then, and it really solidified for me why it is the right path forward and why it is the only solution that makes sense.
Mm.
And they're just like the diversity of people that you'll meet, they're all over the map, left, right, center, all that stuff. And the reason I say that is because like I really think that when you're talking about limited, like small government being a value, that's not a value that I believe the Republican Party holds or the conservatives hold. They might say they do. And I think that some of them like the idea in theory, but they're still voting to spend billions of our dollars to Ukraine. They're still voting for big government policies. So it's kind of like they're paying lip service and they do something completely different. But I think with the libertarians, whether you're like a minarchist, which believes in like minimal government, or I'm basically an anarchist at this point, I believe we burn the whole thing down and start over. And it's a way to experience that and to have those debates. And based on what I've heard of your podcast and the discussion we've had today, it just seems to me like it would help you kind of think some things through. So that would be my recommendation. How do you feel about that?
100%. The only thing that would prevent me from going this June would be my bar prep, but
Ah,
I need to go. And I should plan accordingly so I can go. I think that would be fantastic. I have to go, and I think I would. I feel an association with libertarianism. I guess it's for the people who don't want to check a box, right?
I think that, I think so in some respects. I think that some people are very happy to check the libertarian box. I think some people are like, this is the best solution of what I've heard. I think some people just want to be left alone and they're fine with that too. So it really is. It's like all over the map. I mean, one of the things like libertarians do not believe the same thing. There is a what
No,
the amount of infighting within the liberty community is pretty epic. And it's
no,
often infighting over stupid, ridiculous things. But that's another story for
no.
another day. But that's what I would do.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and at least it worked out for me.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating for myself. I don't know about any audience, but what I do, I mean, when I study libertarianism fully and continue to make more progress with my studies on this effort, do I choose the principles on the left, the right, or libertarianism, which might not have many agreed upon principles, less principles, but maybe holding fast stronger to the ones that they have.
Mhm.
So very interesting. And yes, you're right, Justin. You did tell me about Pork Fest. I know you did. Justin. I'm gonna lie when I say,
Justin is not happy.
man,
You have to pay
yeah,
homage to Justin if you come to PorcFest.
I'll stop by and I'll see him.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Brian, this has been a great chat. I really do appreciate you coming on the channel. Is there anything that you would like to plug before we wrap up?
No, you guys got it. Thank you so much. Really grateful. I don't have the opportunity to come on to be a guest many times, so I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you're doing. I would love to keep in touch and kind of like keep an eye on your political journey, because I think it's going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of years, and I'm glad that you're exploring this in public for all of us to see. So I want to thank you for that. I know better than most people that exploring politics and trying to find your place in public is not the easiest of things, and so I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna put you off the screen and we'll do a debrief in a sec, all right? Cool. All right, guys, that was Brian. And again, I definitely want to encourage you to subscribe to his podcast. I really think it's great, the episodes that I've listened to, and especially my episode, which is the most recent of episodes. It is Searching for Your Political Identity. There is a link in the description below on whatever platform you're watching on, whether that be YouTube, Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, any of the other places that I might be streaming right now that I'm not even aware of because I set things up in StreamYard and then forgot about it. But definitely check it out. I highly encourage it. I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another stream. I don't know what I'm streaming about yet, so you'll have to check in tomorrow for that. But again, in the meantime, if you want to support the work I'm doing, head over to activelyunwoke.com/support. You can make a one-time gift. You can also set up for monthly gifts on Locals, which is my private community, on Patreon, where there's lots of different levels and different perks, on Substack if you want to support my writing. Whatever's clever for you, whatever one works out best. I do appreciate the support, and we will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mount that like button on your way out the door. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.